We're going to take a look today at Herman Melville, one of the first figures, I would say, along with Walt Whitman, to really answer the call that Emerson put out a couple of years earlier for a truly American voice, a truly American literature. And his point, Emerson's point, was that everybody before him had been practicing a kind of copying of European models, and they had all been trying to write like British authors or European authors, and the specific character of America, both in style and content, was not finding representation in the world of literature. And Melville and Whitman come about at roughly the same time and answer that. And they're not alone, but my suggestion is that they are among the most significant, because Melville was a category of weird that people are still trying to get their heads around. And you could say that he was ahead of his time, and he absolutely was, but I think his time is still coming, because we're still trying to catch up to him and what he was doing. In some respects, what he was doing was very conventional and very obvious, and his story is not that different from a lot of artists who struggle throughout their lifetime. But the work that he produced, I would say, is apart from that, is apart from the sad biography of the man, and that is something that is definitely worth digging into and attending to in great detail in the modern day. Herman Melville was born in 1819 in New York. He's a New York City boy. He came from a fairly notable family. He had revolutionary heroes on both sides of his family. His maternal and paternal grandfathers were both heroes of a sort of the American Revolution. And so he had a significant ancestry to fall back on, and that propped him up throughout his life. He started out with some wealth behind him, but as is often the case in bourgeois societies, wealth can fritter itself away. And his childhood was one of declining economic circumstances from the start. Really, his father was a failure in a number of business ventures, and this started to take a toll. And his father died when Melville was 13. Just think about the significance of that psychologically, when he was just becoming just growing into his adulthood. And from there, things really started to come out, because when he died, a lot of the family secrets about the economic situation came about, and so it became even more hardscrabble. Melville went to work after his father died, and his any formal schooling that he had effectively ended at that point. He worked as an office boy significantly for chunks of time. He worked as a school teacher, despite his own lack of formal education. He worked as a school teacher for a time in upstate New York, and I believe in the city for a little bit. None of these jobs were particularly long lasting. They made long lasting impressions on him, certainly, but none of these jobs, he was never in anything long enough to really establish himself in any way. And then at the age of 20, after knocking around through different jobs, he signed on as a merchant seaman on a trip to, I believe it was London, and or at least England. And he got to see a little bit of the world. And just think about that, as you're 20 years old and you've never really well, he's been around the States a little bit, but he went on a commercial venture with his brother, or a friend of his, for his brother, to the Mississippi River, but he really hadn't been anywhere. But suddenly he's out on the open ocean and traveling to a foreign land, and the romance of that really captivated him. And he liked landing in London and seeing the culture there, a more sophisticated at that point city than New York, although New York was very much on the rise. And when he got back to New York, he realized, well, okay, this was pretty cool. I like that. And so he went off and he joined another ship, this time to the South Pacific, a whale ship, to go and collect, famously, whale oil from the foreign oceans. And these are the trip to England was only a couple of months. The trip to the South Seas would be several years. That you got to go all the way down around South America and back up, and it takes an awful lot of time. So this was a monumental thing in his life, but he didn't particularly like this ship as much. And he and a friend of his jumped ship at one point, landed on an island, and just decided, all right, we're going to hang out here. We're going to let the ship go away because we don't really like them, and we'll just hang out until another ship comes by, and we'll join them and say, hey, we got abandoned here. Can you give us a lift? Not a original turn of events for a lot of seamen of the day. But of course, the trick for that was the island turned out to be inhabited by cannibals, or at least as he claimed, and the survival was a little bit touchy for a while there, but his plan did effectively work out. After a little while on the island, surviving on the island, getting to know the natives a little bit and studying them, he and his friend were able to get off the island and hopscotch their way back to so-called civilization. And when he got back, he decided, that was pretty cool, but I want to try writing about it. And so he did. And in a long tradition of people going around doing interesting things and then, publishing an account of that, he joined that parade, and it was a success. He wrote a novel of sorts called Taipei. And it sold quite well. It was a story of seafaring survival in the South Seas, and it's filled of romance and thrilling encounters with foreign cultures and the danger of the savages and all of that stuff. And this stuff sold, so he came out with another one, and it was Omu, and it was similar in that same vein. And he was okay. He was doing all right. He was establishing himself. He was supporting himself. And this is significant to him at this point. But he tried to get a little bit more creative in his future works. He came out with a book called Marty, and that was a little bit more invented. It was less relying on his actual experiences, and he tried to say, well, okay, I'm gonna lean a little bit more into the fiction aspect of this and start to get a little bit more creative. And so he was experimenting because he had never really written anything before in a serious way, and so he is learning on the fly. So he starts to experiment. And that one doesn't sell quite as well. And so he comes out with a couple of more commercial ventures that he just grinds out one after the other. And this is all happening in a couple of years. And he comes out with White Jacket and Redburn, two more seafaring adventures that are very conventional in that in the same mode as Taipei and Omu. And he said, all right, I got to get paid. I just, I want to get back on the charts, so to speak. So, those are not great. And so he sells enough that he figures, all right, that wasn't really a lot of fun just grinding that out. I got something that I've been toying around with, and I want to try and write this. And that, of course, is the big one, Moby-Dick. And here he writes one of the most complicated books in the English language, or really in any language. And ever since then, people have come to this book and they scratch their head and say, I don't know what to make of it. At bottom, it is a tale of adventure, so he's got that basic narrative, but woven through that are all of these very rich and extraordinarily complicated metaphysical debates, where he's really just using it as a way of having an encyclopedia of his thoughts throughout this bizarre adventure. And it's fair to say that it goes well over the head of just about everybody who picked it up at the time. They didn't know what the hell to make of it. And so it did not sell well. It tanked. And that was a little sobering for him and a little disappointing. And so he comes out with another book that is also fairly ambitious, but a little bit less so. That is Pierre. It is not a seafaring adventure. It has nothing to do with that. It is very melodramatic, but still a little lurid. It's part of the so-called city mysteries genre, which has some sexual intrigue and mystery and evil currents underneath the social fabric and all of that. But it also has some significant meditations running throughout it and complex ideas that just throw people, and it also does not sell. And that's pretty much his career. He comes out with a couple of more novels following that. He starts writing short stories or short narratives, novellas for magazines. Those sell okay, but it is very much a retreating action for him. And he is constantly still moving around New York, trying to find places to settle. You can still find little plaques up around. There's one on Lexington and I think 26th Street. I could be wrong about that. That says, Herman Melville lived here, and he was trying to make a living. He was trying to get appointments to different jobs, and his family was trying to set him up with different things. But throughout, you get the sense that it was a hard sell. They couldn't necessarily just install him in a polite, gentlemanly job that would help him support his family. He was eccentric. He was a little bit crazy, quite frankly. There's a lively debate as to how sane he was. He was eccentric, to be certain. But because of his family connections and because of his background, he was able to ultimately secure a job as as a customs inspector in in Manhattan, going through dealing with ships that come in, and people are all right. He can do that. He knows ship stuff, so he can go and do that, and he can make a living like that. And he did, and he supported himself through the rest of his life doing that, writing occasionally, publishing very infrequently at this point. He wrote some poetry, didn't really sell. He did come out with the occasional novel and longer narrative stuff like the Confidence Man and Ishmael Potter, and a long poem called Chlorel, and some Civil War poetry, and all of this stuff. None of it really sold. He didn't really make any money off of any of it. And so he just sort of lived his life as, that guy in the customs office who used to write books. And, you can sort of find one of them in a bookstall somewhere. But he wasn't particularly respected because he had a few popular hits, and then nothing really. Nobody really considered, Moby-Dick to be anything at all. It was really only after he died that he started to take off. When he died, famously some of the obituaries about him were a little bit confused that he was still alive at all. He was just, that kook. And so he had a little bit of an afterlife as he was gestating in the culture, and people would still come back and say, what is this Moby-Dick? What is going on here? They'd find little bits of it that they could sort of follow along with, and then they run right into a brick wall, so to speak. But still, they kept trying because it was giving them just enough to think, all right, now there's something there. But he dies. He dies in 1891. It's really only in the early decades of the 20th century, a full generation or so after he dies, that he gets re-examined. He gets rediscovered, so to speak, by critics, by readers, and they start to recognize that, holy Christ, Moby-Dick is a great book. It's a little weird, but it's damn good. They find also a short novel that he never published in his lifetime, a story called Billy Budd, another like menza novella length short story. And critics like that one too. And they say, okay, this is really significant. And so they go back and they start reassessing the entire corpus of this artist, and they suddenly come to the realization that, well, yeah, he was there all along. We didn't really appreciate him, but this man was a genius. Troubled genius, but a genius. And since then, he has been one of the towering figures of American letters, even as he is one of the more maddening figures, because we're really no closer to figuring out what a lot of his stuff means. He throws out enough hints that we can start to piece things together, but you're slowly realizing in that sense that as you're piecing it together, you're piecing together one version of it, one understanding, one unified vision of it, while there's all sorts of other stuff that is escaping that you can't incorporate because the vision of it is just too large and too polyphonic. It's just all over the place, and no one reading can really pull it all together. So he defies all conventional readings that like to say, oh, okay, well, the theme or the message of, and I hate that word message, the message of Moby-Dick is this. And you can just put it in one simple little aphorism and you just all make sense and everything can plug into that. And that is just not the case. Melville eludes all of that. Melville evades all of that. Melville laughs at all of those attempts to simplify because he is dealing primarily with large questions of life. The meaning of life in very vague terms, the meaning of, well, humanity in oddly specific terms. What does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be a member of society? What does it mean to be an individual? What does it mean to be part of a group? All of these questions are percolating throughout his work, and he provides no easy answers. So it's up to us to go through and try and figure it out. And you could say that, well, I just don't want to do that. That's too much work. Why would I do that? Well, the process of figuring these things out, the process of considering all of these competing ideas and conflicting ideas is no different than living in the world and trying to figure out what the hell your life means. You don't have to know what Herman Melville's life means. His life was chaos. But very frequently, yours will feel like chaos too. And so the process of picking through his writing gives you a sense of what it means to deal with chaos, to deal with a world that doesn't make sense, to deal with a world where you get a sense that there is something going on underneath. There's some meaning happening. Something in life means something, but you just can't nail it down. He shows you a way to go about it. It's not necessarily a successful way because maybe human beings aren't meant to figure those big questions out. Maybe we're just supposed to struggle in that cause so that we can develop our own, however flawed, however fragmentary, our own perception of what it all means. And that's what you have to bear in mind when you come to Herman Melville.